Okay, come. Afternoon, everyone. I need to proceed because I need to finish up early today. I have proctor duty at 2:30 later. Okay, so we will just proceed with the example. Leave only this one example. So the limitation, that one is theory part. You can read on your own. Where's the rest? Got class, ah? Okay, understandable. Okay, so we go this final example on simplex method. We discussed the example 6. Example 7, please go through on your own. It's just similar step. Now, for example 6, a company wishes to produce 2 types of souvenirs. Okay, 2 types of souvenirs. Now, type A result in profit of $1, while type B profit in RM1.20. Okay, now to manufacture type A souvenir, it requires 2 minutes on machine 1. Okay, 1 minute on machine 2. So you have 2 machines over here. Type B requires 1 minute on machine 1, 3 minutes on machine 2. Okay, so there are 3 hours available on machine 1 and 5 hours available on machine 2. Okay, so the question is, how many souvenirs of each type should the company produce in order to maximize profit? Okay, maximize the profit. So that is your objective function. Maximize the profit. Okay. In your slide, it already given you the table like this. Okay, if let's say the question didn't give you the table, okay, if let's say the question didn't give you this table, you should be able to arrange the infos accordingly. Okay, type A and type B. That is the souvenir. Okay, go back to the question. Here. Type A and type B. Profit. This. Now, identify your decision variables. What are the variables that will affect your objective function? Objective function here, you want to maximize the profit. Okay, the question asks how many souvenirs. Okay, so your decision variables is the souvenirs, type A and type B. There are 2 types. So you can put in as X for type A, Y for type B. Okay, it depends. Either you want to use X1 or X2, X, Y, A, B, up to you. Okay, since the solution use XY, so I use XY. Now, decision variables. identify the decision variable first. Then you should come out with your objective function equation. Remember, objective function is to maximize. Okay, maximize. Okay, maximize. So what you want to maximize? The profit based on your decision variables. So P equals to type A is X, type B is Y. So profit for A, $1. So 1X plus type B, which is Y, profit of $1.20. So 1.2 Y. This is your objective function equation. Okay, you must generate this function equation. If you get this wrong, then your simplex method, the tableau later on will be wrong. Okay? Any question? How to get the objective function equation is based on the requirement, the profit. Okay, now what are the constraints? After we identify the objective function, you identify the constraint. What are the constraints? Okay, there are few constraints. It is based on the machine. Machine 1 and machine 2. Okay, we see the table over here. Type A is X, type B is Y. Okay. Now we have developed the objective function. Now these are the constraints. So how it gets this constraint? This one refers to machine 1 constraint. Okay, where 2 minutes of type A, okay, plus 1 minute of type B must be less than 180, equal or less. How do we know this sign? Based on the description. Okay, there are 3 hours available. Max is 3 hours on machine 1. 5 hours on machine 2. That is the max. So the constraint must be lower than this. Okay, this is 3 hours. This one is 5 hours. Okay. So develop the constraint equation for each machine. Now X and Y here, Why it's set as equal or large than 0, not smaller than 0? Why do you think must be 0 or larger? Everyone looks sleepy. Cannot think anymore. Cannot sleep. Haven't sleep. How many days already? Are you sure you're here? Okay, now, why it should be larger than 0? Type A and type B. It must either have or no. 0 or none. Sorry, none or you have it, right? It cannot be negative. The souvenir, it cannot be negative. It's either you have it or you don't have it. 0 or any number. Okay, you cannot be negative. Okay, so here is the constraint. Now, moving forward to set up the tableau, identify the objective function. Remember to rearrange your objective function equals to 0. Because later on, this value is the one we will input in the table. Okay, then add S1, S2 to your constraint equation. Okay, S1, S2 to transform the constraint to equal constraint. Okay, up to that step. Then set up the table. Okay, it must be in table form. Don't put it in description form. Put in table form. Okay. That's why you call as tableau method. Okay. Now, list up what is your variables. We have x1, x2. x2 here refers to y. Okay, you can put y over there, no issue. Okay, S1, S2, P is your objective function. B is your beta. Beta means the equal over here. Okay, 0 also refers to beta. Okay, arrange them row by row. Okay, this is the first equation, second equation. Okay, the last row is the P equation. Okay, this one comes from the objective function equation. Okay, for the objective function, x1, -1, x2, which is the y, is -1.2. There is no s, so that's why it is 0. P equals to 1. Okay, and beta equals to 0. Okay, now next step. Okay, up to there, any question? Let me know if I go too fast. Huh? Okay, next step is to find the pivot value. Okay, pivot column and pivot row, then the pivot value. Now, pivot column. Why do we choose this as the pivot column? Why negative 1.2, not negative 1? Cannot think, eh? Okay, I give you the answer. Because of the smallest negative value. Okay, because of the smallest negative value. We took it as the pivot column. Smallest negative value. Okay, so we take it as the whole pivot column. So this whole is the pivot column. Okay, now we want to find which row to pivot. In order to decide which row to pivot, we need to find the pivot value. Okay, how to find the pivot value? By using the indicator. Beta value divide by the value in the pivot column. Okay, beta divide by value in the pivot column. Here, this row is 3. Okay, the first row is equals to 1. Okay. Then take the lowest value from the operation. Take the lowest value, which is the 100, equal to the lowest value. Okay, so this lowest value determine your pivot value. Okay, so lowest value, which is this row, 100, is due to the 3. Okay, the 3. This value is your pivot value. Because it gives you the lowest indicator. Okay, pivot value that gives the lowest indicator. Okay, so 3 is your pivot value. Now you have your pivot row. You have identified your pivot row. Okay, up to there? Can ah? Jivan Raj, can? Okay. Next, taking the pivot row and pivot row. Okay, create the next table. create the next table. Okay, so this is from the original value just now. Original value. Pivot row. Now, take the pivot value. Okay, these three convert to 1. Okay, convert to 1. So how to convert to 1? 3 divided by 3. 3 divided by 3 equals to 1. That's how you get 1 on the for the pivot value. Okay, so when that pivot value divide by 3, the rest should divide by 3 as well. Okay, so that's how you get the 0.33 and 100. Okay, up to that. So these are the new value. Now taking that new value, create the new table. Okay, create new table. Just now, this is your pivot row, the one that we divide by 3. Okay, now, how to get the other value? How to get the other value? How it get this 1.67, 0.33, and 80? Remember, just now, this is your pivot row. Sorry, pivot column, pivot row. So this one, 1. The top and bottom must be 0. Okay, must be 0. So how we zero? We should find the factors, the factor equation. How to zero it? Okay, I take back the original value. Wait. This is the original table. I put it here first to show you how we should convert to 0. Where is it? Okay, now how we should convert those value to 0. I cancel first. Now. Okay, we should find the factor. Top should be 0, bottom should be 0. Okay, on the pivot column, pivot column. Now, how it gets 0? Okay, I label the previous value, the original value, R1, R2, and R3. Okay, now, this is our R prime 2, the new value. To get the new R prime 1, okay, we must get the answer 0 using the previous value of R1. Put it here. To find the new value of R1, okay, we should use the previous value, the original value, R1 minus, we must use the pivot row. Okay, R1 is 1. R2 is 1. So how to make it 0? R1 minus R2. R2 prime. In front here is 1 because this is 1. Okay, let's try. R1, 1 minus R2, 1 equals to 0. Okay, now we get, here is 0. Okay, so R prime 1, 2. Row 1, column 2. Okay, row 1, column 2. So R prime 1, 2 equals to 0. Row 1, column 2. So this R1 is your factor, equation factor. Factor for R prime 1. So for the whole row, you should use this equation. Okay, now to find R11, R prime 11, R prime 1, row 1, column 1, R prime 11, row 1, column 1. Okay, we use the factor, equation factor over here, which is R1, 2 minus R prime 2. R prime 2 here is 0.33. What do you get? What do you get? Yes, 1.67. That's how it explains the value in table number 2. Okay, so here 1.67. Now, how about R prime 1, 3? Using the same factor, R1 column 3, which is 1 minus 0 equals to 1. Okay, so R prime 1, 4. R1, which is 0, minus R prime 2, 0.33. So you get negative 0.33. Okay, same method you should find for P and B using the same factor to find R prime 1. Okay, this factor equation valid for R prime 1 only. Now you have one more row to find. R prime 3. We need to find the factor. On the pivot column, okay, R prime 3 here should be 0. So what is the factor equation that we can get 0? For R prime 3, 2. Okay, row 3, column 2. Now we should find the factor R prime 3 using the previous value, which is negative 1.2. Involve the pivot value. Okay, so to zero the value, since R prime 2 is 1, in order to zero it, you must multiply with 1.2. R prime 2. R3. Okay, so we try negative 1.2 plus 1.2. So you get 0. Okay, so this is the equation, factor equation for R prime 3. Now let's try to find for R prime 3, 1 using the factor equation. Okay, so R prime 3, 1, R3 which is the original value, -1, plus 1.2, R prime 2. Okay, R prime 2 here, you have value 0.33. What you get? For the R prime 31. Negative 0.06, 0. 0. Sorry, negative 0.6. Okay, so you should get this value, negative 0.6. That's how you get the value, negative 0.6. Okay. So you can try to find out what are the other values. You should get these same figures, okay, for the rest. Okay, so this is the table number 2, W number 2. Just now, W number 1. Here, this is the W number 1, the original, where you identify the first pivot column. Okay, then you should develop W number 2. Okay, so this is the W number 2 after you do the pivoting on the first table. Since table number 2, you still have the negative value. Okay, remember the conditions are, the condition is the bottom row must not having negative value. Okay, if you still have negative value, you need to repeat the step. So this is your pivot, the new pivot column. Find out your pivot value. Okay, pivot value. So this is your new pivot row. Okay, so repeat the same step. Develop W number 3. Here is the new, new pivot row, which you has convert to 1. Okay, 1.67. 1.67 divided by 1.67. So that how do you get 1? Okay. After repeating the same step, you should be getting W number 3 over here. Okay, so now check for the bottom row. There is no more negative value. So you can conclude W number 3 is your final table. Final W. Because bottom rows all positive value. Okay, so from there you can conclude 1 is equivalent to the beta. Okay, so x1 equals to the beta value, x2 equal to this beta value, p equals to this beta value. Okay, s1 and s2 equals to 0. Okay, you should not end your answer up to the final table. You should conclude. Okay, then after you find the final tableau, conclude your findings. What is the value of the x, x1, x2, and the p? Now, previously, x1 is the type A. X2 is type B. Okay, so now the maximum profit is 148.74. With this amount of type A and type B. Okay, so that's it. Your final answer. This answer, 1 mark each. Okay, any question? Okay, so for the mark distribution for this kind of question, just to share with you. For the mark distribution, decision variables, correct decision variables, 1 mark each. Okay, correct objective function equation, 1 marks. Correct constraint is either 1 or half mark. Okay, you have mark over here. Max is 1. Okay, so that's why it is important for you to identify what are your variables and the objective function. Plus the constraint. Okay, then the developed table, these all bring marks as well. The identification of your pivot value bring marks. Okay. Basically, this one question can get until 16 marks. Okay. Any question? This one will cover question 5 in your final exam. other type of question. It can go max to 20, but perhaps it will have few W tables. Here we have 3, right? So perhaps if you are required to do like 4, 5 W table, it can brings up to 20 marks. Okay? Yeah. Now example 7, please try on your own the same approach, which this one related to the chemical process. Okay, similar approach. Identify what are the decision variables, objective function, and also the constraint. Okay. Yeah, this one you please go through on your own. Now for the limitation, since all of these are theory, I leave it to you to read on your own. Okay, for the limitations and the rest of the slide. For your own understanding. Okay. Now, we are finished with chapter 5. That's all for chapter 5. Okay, so I want to conclude our course based on the CLO. And those should be focused on your final exam. Okay.